All right, so today we're going to be going over the fundamentals of Lincoln Douglas debate, like what makes it unique from the other debates and what skills you need to actually be able to go into these rounds and succeed, as well as some background knowledge about some terminology that will be important and big ideas when it comes to LD debate. So, without further ado, let's get right into it. So obviously, the first question to answer is what is LD and how it changes from the other types of debates and just from our conceptions of debate in general. So the term Lincoln Douglas, as I'm sure you could probably guess where one of those words comes from, is based off the debates between Abraham Lincoln and Stephen Douglas for an Illinois Senate seat. And they mainly focused like the debates that they had on issues such as slavery and moral issues, which is where the entire idea of Lincoln Douglas debate comes from, and it's also how we get a lot of the things that make LD unique. So the first thing, obviously, is Lincoln Douglas is famous for being based off of morals. In fact, you'll hear a term in round many a times as you debate, which will say Lincoln Douglas is a debate of morals. But what does that actually mean? So the point of LD, as opposed to other debates, is that we're going to have this goal as a way to achieve morality, as the way to achieve what is the best thing for society. And then our arguments are going to be that we are achieving that goal. In other debates, generally, we're just going to be saying that we are making the best situation for society. So we're going to say that we're doing things such as reducing poverty or increasing the stock market or reducing debts and so on and so forth. We're just going to say we're doing these inherently good things. Whereas in LD, we give ourselves that specific moral goal that is based in philosophy. So that's where we see that change is we have a lot more philosophy going into LD. There's a lot less just objective good, and there's a lot of arguments about what is actually good, as obviously that changes from person to person. However, there is, of course, the question of how do we measure what is moral, which we're going to talk about whenever we get into the specific terminology that we use in LD. So just think about that in the back of your mind and how you personally measure what the right choice is. So first, definitely something easy to take of note is how the debate is actually run and the amount of times that you get to speak. So we're just going to do a quick overview of what's going to happen in every single LD round. So the first thing that is going to happen is the affirmative side is going to come up and read their case. This is going to be their reasoning for why they should affirm the resolution. So, for instance, the current topic states that we ought to put forth a federal jobs guarantee. So the affirmative side is going to come up and say why that is a good thing. Why, if the United States had a federal jobs guarantee, it would be good for the country. Then the negative side is going to come up and cross-examine the affirmative for 3 minutes. They're going to be asking them questions such as how they're actually solving certain issues, or maybe even simply clarifying questions such as, I didn't hear what your first argument was, can you tell me what it was again? It can be whatever questions they'd like. The best cross-examinations are going to be ones that pokes holes in the affirmative case, but that takes time to get into, and as you first start, most of them will probably just be clarifying what the affirmative side said. So that's simply a questioning period right there. Then the negative side is going to come up, and first they're going to give their case, but they have 7 minutes for their speech, and the negative case is definitely not going to take 7 minutes. A good negative case takes probably around 3:30 to 4 minutes. So now we have an extra 3 minutes to 3:30 that we don't have anything to do with. Well, yes, we do. Now we're going to go and look towards the affirmative case and respond to that and say why the affirmative case is wrong. That's where we're going to get the actual clash and debate that people think about, where it's arguing with each other and no, your idea is wrong. And obviously, that's very exaggerated and we're very respectful and organized in the way we do it. But this is what people think of. It's the actual argumentation and going back and forth on these big ideas that the two sides are presenting. Then, after they're done doing that, the affirmative side is going to come up, and this time they get to ask the negative side questions, both about their case and the rebuttal. And as with before, yes, you can just ask clarifying questions, but it's better if you actually start to deconstruct their case and prove what's wrong. And then, from this point forward, the two sides are simply going to go back and forth. The affirmative side is going to come up and say why the negative side is wrong and why you should vote for them. Then the negative side is going to come up and do the exact same thing. And then the affirmative side is going to come up one last time and do it again. Additionally, it is important to take note that we do have prep time to use at your own discretion throughout the round. Most of the time, it's 4 minutes for each side, and you can technically use it whenever. Now, there are certain times when it's frowned upon to use it. For instance, generally, you should not use it before cross-examination. I, as a judge, personally would not necessarily say that's a reason why I wouldn't vote for you, but it's definitely not the best strategic option, and it's kind of frowned upon within the debate community. Most of the time, you're going to take it before your rebuttal speeches. So if you're on the negative side, you're going to take it before your 7-minute speech and your 6-minute speech. And if you're on the affirmative side, you'll take it before your 4-minute speech and your 3rd-minute speech. Additionally, currently the rules are slightly different since we are debating in a virtual format, and sometimes that takes a bit of extra effort, such as digitally sending people cases or dealing with technical issues and so on and so forth. The Speech and Debate Association has opted to give us 5 minutes of prep time each. So that's also a nice little benefit of online debating, is you get a little bit of extra time to prepare your arguments. But that's what you're going to use your prep time for. You're going to think of what you need to say, maybe get some evidence together, whatever you may need to actually get ready to go up and give your speech. But that was a very quick overview of what the debate is going to look like. I would recommend to see this in action to go watch a debate. You can find some of them on YouTube. Just look up Lincoln Douglas debate. Maybe national finals rounds are always good. My personal favorite is the 2016 national finals round. I actually personally know the man who won and became national champion, and he's a great debater. So I definitely recommend going and watching a round to kind of seeing the flow, because, me explaining it right here definitely does not, it doesn't do it justice. But anyway, let's move on to the next thing. So we talked about philosophy for a little bit back there, and I kind of gave the basic idea, but we still really don't know how we're going to actually put philosophy into the round. So I like to use the analogy of this treasure map. So you have 3 main terms that we're going to use in LD to argue that you're actually achieving your goal and that you should win the debate. And that's the value criterion, and the contentions. Now, without connecting it to the treasure map, we'll just go through and quickly state what these things are, and then we'll explain them a bit more. So the first thing is the value, which is the overall goal in the round. It's going to be a big idea that is really hard to it's intangible, and it's not really easy to measure. It's things like morality and justice and all these big ideas that are not easy to say whenever you've achieved them. And as a result, it's not easy to tell whenever we've achieved it. We need something to help lead us towards the goal, tell us how we're actually going to achieve justice or morality or these big ideas that come with the value, which is where the value criterion comes in. Think of criterion like criteria. It's the singular version of the word criteria, and that's exactly what it is. As with the word criteria, it's what we need to do in order to achieve the value. Its whole goal is to make the value a lot simpler and give us step-by-step instructions of what we need to do in order to actually achieve the value. So, for instance, if we have a value of justice and we say that justice is the most important thing in the round, then we might have a value criterion of resisting oppression. And we say that in order to achieve justice, we need to reduce oppression in our society and inequality and stuff. And that's our criterion. And then we also have our contentions, which is by far the easiest one to understand. it is just your arguments. It's the reasons why you should vote for your side. The goal of these contentions should be to achieve your value criterion. So if our value criterion is resisting oppression, then your argument should be based off of how affirming or negating the resolution is going to help reduce oppression. That should be what you're keeping in mind when you write your contentions. So those are really big concepts that are sometimes hard to understand. Until you see them in round, you're probably going to struggle with it. But to make it a little easier to understand, we have our little treasure map example. So let's go through those terms and kind of see how they relate. So our treasure map is going to be like our round, right? So the value is our X. That's what we're trying to get to. That's our end goal. Just like in a debate round, your end goal is to achieve justice or morality or whatever value you're using. The X on the map is your end goal whenever you're treasure hunting. You want to get there and you want to get the treasure. So that's how those line up. But how do we get to the treasure? We don't know how we're actually trying to get there, so we need the map to help us along, which is exactly how we feel about the value. We don't know how we're actually going to get to the value. We need the value criterion to help us along. So the steps that we take on this map here and the map as a whole are like our value criterion. It tells us what we need to do in order to get to that value. And then the actual individual dots on the map that lead us to our X is the contentions. They're the individual steps that we take to get closer and closer to that value. So that's a nice little analogy there. It should still probably be a little fuzzy in your head. So don't feel like you're not understanding it and that like you're not going to be able to get a hold of it just because right now it's a little unclear, because it definitely takes some getting used to. When you go and watch the round and you actually see the values and criterions in use, that should help you out a little bit. But sometimes it just takes going into a round yourself for it to finally click. So don't worry about it too much right now. Just kind of know the basic concept behind it. So now let's just talk about a couple other nice, unique things about LD that make it really fun. So for Lincoln Douglas debate, the topic that we are going to be debating about is going to change every other month. I personally think that this is the best schedule for debates, because in the other two debates, public forum and policy, they change at different rates that I don't quite like as much. So under public forum, it's every month. The way that they do topics is actually changing a little bit right now, and they're kind of moving towards bi-monthly, but some of them still change every single month, and that's really fast in my opinion. And I don't think you get the ability to understand the topics as in-depth as you do with Lincoln Douglas debate. On the other hand, we have policy, which lasts for an entire year, and that's a lot of time to be spending with only one topic. And if you get a bad topic, then you just have to deal with it for a year. I didn't debate policy, so obviously my opinion on the policy topics don't hold much weight. But I personally would not have really enjoyed debating the policy topic last year about arms sales. It simply didn't intrigue me that much. But if I was in policy, I would have simply had to deal with it for a whole year. In LD, whenever we get bad topics, in a couple months, they'll be swapped out for a new one. Of course, that does also mean that if you get a really good topic in a couple months, it'll be swapped out. But I still think that the bi-monthly schedule is by far the best one. Beyond that, another really good feature of LD, which obviously links back to the original Lincoln Douglas debates, is that you debate by yourself. Public forum and policy both have partners whenever you're debating, which some people find really good because they feel like they have someone to rely on. But I think Lincoln Douglas is a lot better, especially at least for people like me, for a couple reasons. The first is that I simply find it easier to have the ideas running through my head as I'm debating and only have to focus on getting them and articulating them to my judge. Whereas in the other debates, you have to be more coordinated with your partner and make sure you guys are on the same page before you actually go up and give your speech. But beyond that, the most important thing I like about LD is that the victories are all your own. Sure, you might have a little help before you go into the round, but when you win a round, you know it's because you were the one who were able to convince your judge. You were the better debater than your opponent. Whereas in a partnered event, yeah, you might have won the round, but maybe it was your opponent that was the one who really convinced the judge. Or even on the flip side, the other thing about LD is that failures are your own, and you only have yourself to blame. If you lose a round in public forum and policy, it might not be your fault. You might have someone holding you back. But in LD, you know that's your own fault, and that if you work harder, you can get better. Whereas in the other debates, you can't control your partner and you can't control the amount of work they come in. You can only do so well if they don't care and they're not willing to put in the work. In LD, your success is all your own, and it's all based off of your work ethic and how much you're willing to put into the art of debating. And lastly, by far my favorite thing about LD is that analytical responses are encouraged. To explain what that means a little bit, there are generally two types of arguments that you can make, which is empirical and analytical. Empirical is based off evidence, which is what most people think of whenever they think of argumentation. They think about having to provide actual evidence from sources to actually prove their point. But in LD, it was founded on the idea that you didn't have to use any evidence at all. You could go the entire debate without bringing up a single source. Now, that has fallen somewhat out of favor within the current LD community, and you definitely have to use sources. Your case should be pretty much exclusively sources. But once you get to once you get to the rebuttals, you can stop using evidence entirely. In fact, I frequently do and still see significant success with an LD because that's how it was set up to be. In the other debates, if you don't bring up evidence in your rebuttal speeches, you simply will lose the round. But in this one, you can use analytical evidence or arguments, which is based off of your own thought process and logic and reasoning. And that, I think, is just a lot better for debate as a whole, because the winner of the round is no longer solely dictated on who has the most evidence, but it's actually dictated on who has the better critical thinking skills and can point out holes in your argument. That's why I think that it's really beautiful that we can use a lot of analytical responses in LD. So here's a link. I actually am not sure if it'll work if you guys don't have a resource package with the Speech and Debate Association, but I personally really like this round in addition to the 2016 one that we were talking about earlier. And if you want a good round to watch, I would recommend typing this link and going there, seeing if it works for you. But otherwise, that's just the basic of LD. And there's a lot more you're going to have to learn before you can actually obviously go in and do a debate. But this is like the background information that you need to start going into other lectures. So I really hope that you guys were intrigued by learning a bit about LD and how it's done. Lincoln Douglas debate has been my inspiration in speech and debate as a whole. Like, I've done other stuff, but it's really what keeps me going, and I get excited when other people get to start learning about it and getting into the same passion that I've had for so long. So I hope that this was interesting for you guys, if a little short and a little confusing at times. But I hope you got some good base information from it, and I hope you continue to learn about LD and are able to become a great debater.